Welcome to Gold Prospecting. This is Prospector Jess again. Tonight's subject is a good one. We're going to talk about gold sampling, or what's a gold sample. Uh, Basically, what we want to get into is the principle behind one of the most important things that's missing from many prospectors' portfolio, and that is basically the discipline to measure the amount of gold you're pulling out and start to plot a map of where the gold is going and what it's telling you. It's not that necessary if you're just in it for pure recreation, but even there, it can make it a lot more interesting because you'll get a chance to peer into the subsurface situation and look at the concentrations of gold and start learning about how to predict it yourself. So tonight I'm going to talk about this subject. I'm going to start off as usual with our presentation. So I'm going to roll into that right now, and then when we're done, we'll start into our Q&A session for the night. So here we go. What's a gold sample? Prospector Jess from huntingforgold.com. I'm presenting it, and I'm your host. Let's take a look at what a gold sample is. A definition for a gold sample is pretty simple. A gold prospecting test hole for quantifying the gold concentration in a small area, or small volume, technically. Could be a small weight, depending upon what you're doing, but the idea is it comes down to how much gold per unit you're getting out of your recovery. And before you start recovering anything, if you're just doing it as recreational prospector or a small-scale miner, you're going to want to get used to trying to discover where the gold really is concentrated the highest so you spend less effort. It's really critical if you're in it for a business, because this is how you measure your return on investment when you run around and pour diesel fuel or gasoline into the situation and try to power the rocks around. You want to make sure you're powering the rocks that'll produce you the most gold per ton. And the same thing holds true for a small scale guy. It's just gold per pan. So it's used to indicate the pay streak direction and the gold potential over a larger area. So why sample for gold? To multiply the results of your recovery effort, to limit the risk and waste of your production effort in your endeavor, to get there much faster. Are we there yet? At the gold. Three simple but powerful types of gold samples I'm going to discuss tonight. First one is the pick, pan, and shovel spot test. Pretty simple, and it speaks for itself as to what it is. I was going to have an image. Then comes the layer cake. I was going to have an image of that too. We'll see that in a second. Borehole, core drills, and augers. Basically, this is a more unusual type of sample, and it requires a little more equipment and discipline. But you'll want to talk about it in the context. So we'll get to that in a second. So what types of samples? Those three powerful types: pick, pan, and shovel, the layer cake, and the borehole or drill hole. Do a little video clip here, see how this works out. Hang on. Back up one slide. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Murphy. So basically what we're going to do, continue on to the next. So what you're looking for in a sample hole basically are the gold colors, or a measurement of gold in terms of the grams or ounces per unit volume or per weight of rock material, such as a ton. And the objective is to understand what the recovery rate would be if you had so many units of that, so many pans or so many tons. And that will predict whether or not you have a viable situation, a workable mine that you can recover enough material to justify investing in further work or equipment. And that's really what it comes down to. So you're looking also for related materials and other minerals that may go along with gold, or may go with other valuable precious metals and or diamonds. So platinum, diamonds, all kinds of corundum materials, sapphires, etc. So each of these things need to be categorized and cataloged for your sample to have an accurate picture of what your mining site has the potential to produce. Because remember, what you're doing here is trying to use a handful of samples to predict what a much larger thing would be if you had the opportunity to mine it. Now, if you're doing that and you discover a very rich prospect, one of the things you're going to want to do here is basically keep this thing secure, because it represents true value, and you want to make sure you have all of the mineral rights tied up in whatever you're doing so that you get the maximum return as a prospector. Because the minute miners move in, they're going to start production, and or the owner, and they won't realize that you've given the key to their success, and you want to make sure you get your return from that. Any ore samples or any alloys that you find around, as well as any kind of minerals such as iron, etc. These all kind of are predictors and or elements that would help you track and put together in a map what's going on in the soils beneath you. Black sands, iron-bearing clay, minerals, false bedrocks, etc. Take sharp and good quality photographs, close-ups and wide angle, far away. The objective is to understand, one of the things I get quite commonly is people will send me photographs and they're real blurry. I don't know whether it's gold or just a piece of beige sheet or what. And what you want to do is have something sharp enough that you can actually begin to look at the details and crystal structures, if you're looking close up, or the layers and the rock type materials that are along co-resident with the gold sample you took, because that tells a story also. You're building a story. So what do you sample? A simple method to get results that was brought up in Jack Black's book, The Gold Prospector's Handbook. I'll have that in this next little video clip. But basically, it allows you to quickly sample and produce an accurate picture of the material below you, as well as it is technically, if it's done properly, it's the kind of thing that a geologist would do for a full-scale assay. Now, that doesn't say I'm saying everybody go out and do this method. It is something to be aware of, because if you did find a rich vein or a rich placer deposit, you would want to make sure that you bring in the right consultant, and that they would deploy this kind of method, so you know kind of what you're looking for. But before you do that, you want to make sure you tie up the rights, as I said before they ever even hear about it, because we've seen that on Gold Rush before, haven't we? Gee, I think I'll take Porcupine Creek for myself. So given that, we have looked at what you're doing, and you cycling through that pile, one of the things you're going to do is take that huge pile of rock material you might have pulled out with a trencher, backhoe, or whatever, and you're going to reduce it down to a coffee can or less to send into an assay office that will actually go and fire reduce that further. The objective there is to find out the percentage of gold per the volume, but it's inferred that the volume you gave, the final result, is so well mixed up that statistically it represents that big pile you reduce down to that little piece. Now, of course, you don't want to throw it out if it's rich stuff, but you'll put it into a separate place, not to be mixed up, because if you play games and try to put a little more gold into it, that's called high grading, or salting, or if you accidentally introduce some other dirt from the country rock around you, that's basically reducing or lowering your concentration. You're now going to find that your sample measurement is worthless because it doesn't really represent the values embedded in the sample that you pulled out from the native earth you're calling your prospect. So you got all that? So this is very important that you go through and be honest about what you're getting and where you're getting it from. So specific zones where you strategically test for gold need to be marked down. A few random samples are pulled in as well. Okay? And when you sample, you want to make sure you sample at the earliest opportunity after you complete your first site surveys. So in what I have is my 5-stage process. This is after stage 2. This is stage 3, the sampling stage. And what we're doing basically in stage 2 is determining where the most likely places to sample should be based on the river flow and terrain and geology and other things, history. And so that's important to put that together. Any changes that you do in your plan would indicate samples that you might want to add to your list or take away based on what you're getting for results. Track them in records. So you get your gold concentrations, weight per unit volume, gold weight per the total sample that you pull out. Track the location. Use a GPS, a map, a compass, whatever you have to get yourself on track with the location. So that's important to do that because it basically will help you in the long haul determine the trajectory you're going to take when you start mapping out the pay streak and your actual mining potential. You're planning to recover. Also be discreet with this information. It's not, at this point, you're now putting a lot of serious time into it. It's not something you just want to toss around. Now, it might be if you want advice, but make sure that you have, the proper trust and security behind those that you share this information with, because this represents value. And that takes us to the end of our show and for tonight. And one of the things I wanted to go to right now, hang on a second, I'll flip things back to my face. And share off. So now, so like I was saying, you want to make sure you have a GPS. This is kind of antique, but it's actually a pretty valuable one, Garmin unit. But the idea is to be able to take the information. Now, the problem with the GPS, and the reason I mentioned a compass, is you need to kind of get good at how to plot maps if you need to do this. At least take some photographs of the major objects and landmarks in your area and the angles to them. You also want to get used to measuring, so get nice handy-dandy long tape measure from your local Harbor Freight store and measure out your 100-yard stretch. And the reason you want to do that is you want some accuracy in terms of determining the volume. Remember the width and height and diameter and all that stuff. So you're trying to be a little more scientific. Now, is this crazy for a simple miner recreationist? Yes. Is it silly to learn about? No, because you don't know when you might shift gears into wanting to invest in some heavy-duty equipment or to borrow or rent some. And And if you haven't done this yet, then you need to step in and do this step before you go off and become like a few TV stars we know recently who went to Guyana and shall remain nameless. But anyway, you when you pop $1 million into a piece of trauma equipment and then invest in hauling it into the deep jungles, you better have done some sampling, and you better have backup plans in mind, because you never know what can happen. And you may also want to make darn sure that when your sampling's done, you don't just tout it to the world, because the neighbors might come in and hightail in and basically claim jump you and pull out your gold. Before you know it, it's all gone.